In this video, Jordan Peterson talks about the framework that people live within and use to see the world.
There's modern personality theories that are fundamentally cybernetic. So this is basically a cybernetic model. And cybernetic models hypothesize that active organisms, they basically perform according to the following schema. They posit a target and move towards it, and then they regulate themselves so they don't deviate too much from the trail. So that's what this is as far as I'm concerned. So here's the basic framework within which you live as far as I can tell, and I don't think you can get out of it. And you carry this frame with you all the time and you're looking at the world through it. And the framework has a couple of substructures, and one is you have some sense of where you are. And that's like a theory. It's a theory of who you are and where you are. It's a theory of the present. These are the present conditions. Now, you might think you observe the present around you, and those are factual observations, and so your conceptualization of the present isn't a theory, it's a fact, but don't be thinking that, you know. It's a theory. You might be wrong about the present. The person you're in love with might be having an affair, right? So there can be massive gaps in your assumptions about the present, you know. You think you're healthy, but maybe you're not, you know. You think your boss likes you, but maybe they don't. You think your degree is going to be useful, but maybe it isn't, you know. Well, it's just a straightforward observation, but it's an important one. You could be wrong about now, okay? Because one of the things we're going to try to figure out is, where is it that you could be wrong? And what does it mean that you could be wrong all those places? And what should you do about the fact that you could be wrong all those places? And then we're also going to try to figure out what happens if you find out that you're wrong. So for example, you're going out with someone, you love them, perhaps they've made promises to you, and you know, poof, you find out that they've been having an affair with 3 people for the last 5 years. It's like, hey, you're wrong. And so now where are you? What does that mean that you're wrong? Well, it means a lot of things. It means a lot of things that it might mean a lot more things than it means, which is a very strange thing. It might mean that you're so clueless that it's just mind-boggling, you know, and that you're blind as a bat. So that's one possibility. And that you're like that and you've always been like that and you better do something about it quick. That's a possibility. Might be that you hooked up with a psychopath, right? Which is also something that you should avoid. But that would mean you don't understand people well enough to know when they're psychopaths or not, or maybe that you're fatally attracted to them in some bizarre way. You know, it also means that whatever future you were envisioning, that was really a delusion, because that's gone. And it also means that you've blown out most of your past, at least insofar as that relationship was part of your past, because nothing that you thought was happening was what was happening. So then you might think, one moment you're somewhere, and then you get the realization, and the next moment you are somewhere else. And so one of the things I would propose to you is that those are actually 2 important places. The one place is the place you are when what you're doing is working, and the other place is the place you are when what you're doing is not working. And I would also say, in some weird sense, those are permanent places. And I'll tell you why I think this, but I think they're akin in some manner to explored territory and unexplored territory. And that's their sort of biological basis, because we know that animals are territorial, right? Almost every animal has a sketched out territory. If social animals have to organize themselves within that territory with other creatures like them, so part of their territory is almost always a dominance hierarchy, but they have a territory, and they don't like going outside of it. So I can give you an example. So my parents had a dog and a cat, and my dad used to take the dog for a walk all the time, but the cat really liked the dog, and so it was kind of irritated that the dog would leave, and so the cat started following my dad around on his walks. And so it was really interesting, because the first thing the cat did was, when it was following, it wasn't right behind the dog. There's no way it was going to do that. It would slink along all of the buildings, so it would follow about 30 feet behind, and it would keep one side right against a building, and then it would sort of zip across the intervening spaces of the houses. Right? And you might think, well, why was it doing that? And the answer is, it didn't know where the bloody predators were, it didn't know where the big dogs were, it didn't know anything about the new places it was going, so it was going to stick its side against one hard wall so that the complexity was cut in half, and it was going to go really slow on the off chance that some massive hound came out and ate it. So it was being very careful. So that was pretty cool. So it did that for quite a while. And then, because nothing massive jumped out and ate it, and because it started to understand the territory, it knew where it could hide, it got a little braver. And over a couple of months, it got to the point where it actually followed the dog. Because it had expanded its territory and mastered its knowledge of the territory. But then I was walking with them one day, and they had a route, hey? And my dad had the dog, and he wanted to take the dog a little farther than he would normally go with the dog. And so he was taking the dog across the street, but the cat just stayed on the corner and cried. Because it was meowing, obviously, but it was very upset because it wasn't going out into that weird new place that it had no knowledge about. And so it was, making its fear, really, known. And animals are like that, So here's something to think about. This blew me away when I first conceptualized it. It was one of the things that made me understand that psychologists are always asking questions backwards. I'll give you an example. It's like, why do people take cocaine? That's a question, right? I think it's a good question. It's a stupid question. The question is, why doesn't everybody take cocaine all the time? That's the question. Because we know what cocaine does, right? It activates the primary incentive reward systems, and almost everything you do is in an attempt to activate the primary incentive reward system. So you've got this white powder, and there it is. It's like you should be nose deep in that stuff nonstop. But you're not. Why? What's wrong with you people? So that's one example of where psychology's got it backwards. We know why people take intoxicating drugs. It's dead simple. Sometimes it reduces their anxiety, sometimes it reduces their pain, sometimes it cranks up their incentive reward systems, it hijacks the system, it does it biochemically, it's perfectly obvious. So that's one example. Now another example is this. How do animals learn fear? That's a prime behavioral question, right? It's the wrong question. Because it presumes that the standard animal is calm. Why would you presume that? Why wouldn't we presume instead that the standard animal is terrified? And that the animal only learns how not to be terrified with difficulty and under very restricted circumstances? Well, that's a much better way of thinking about it, and it makes a lot more sense because the animal's in danger, especially if it doesn't know its territory. So here's how you teach an animal to be afraid if you're a behaviorist. And I am not making fun of behaviorists. A lot of what I've learned about psychology that's actually real has come from behaviorists. Like, they're rigorous scientists, and they learned an awful lot from analyzing animal behavior that was incredibly profound, and they laid the ground for modern neuroscience. The real stuff, not the fMRI stuff, the real stuff.